Hey guys, it's Wayne Salter. This is one of the bonuses you're getting on the free video series of Weight Loss Essentials Q&A. I'm here with James Barbour. I'm going to fix the camera a little bit. A little more you, a little less me. Super. James, people of Greenville. Hey, I really appreciate you taking time to do this. The reason I wanted to speak with James about this subject of getting your mind right for fitness and weight loss. James, you've been a leader and a professional development person since 2002. I wanted to go through the creds that he has so you guys can understand where he's coming from. He is a licensed professional counselor, supervisor. He's a licensed clinical addiction specialist. He's a certified clinical supervisor and certified hypnotherapist. That's pretty interesting. And a certified trainer and life coach. And as a performance coach and counselor, you specialize in helping people and couples and organizations attain their personal and professional development goals using methods such as, you guys may remember some things like this from school. He uses cognitive behavior techniques, acceptance and commitment therapeutic strategies, redecision therapy, solution-focused intervention, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and therapeutic hypnosis. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to know what all this is, and he doesn't use all of this for all of his clients. You have to find what works for people, right?
That's right.
Super. And I really appreciate you taking time out to meet with us today. What do you think the roles of your mental attitude have to do with achieving fitness goals?
Sure. So, mental attitude is paramount with achieving any type of a goal. And, you were speaking with me earlier, wondering how many people I've worked with fitness goals and those types of things. And I've worked with quite a few people over the years, whether it's a performance goal, maybe they're already physically fit, but they're just looking to enhance that, or whether they're really looking to lose some weight. And the latter is really what more I'm addressing today, although a lot of these principles are going to apply to anybody across the board, but I'm sure you see it a lot with what you do. One of the hardest things to do is to just get in the door.
That's it.
And that is a mental piece. There's something that's happening at the mental, attitudinal level that stops somebody from walking in that door, whether it's excuses or whether it's not being clear that it's important for them. I think most people today have an awareness that we could, we need to be more physically fit. We see the statistics, we see the fear mongering and things like that, but it is true. We're not, as a statistical society, in the best shape that we can be in. And we don't have to be in the best shape, but if we have a desire, and that's really what this is all about, if we have a desire for change in an area of our life, and in this case we're speaking specifically to physical fitness or losing weight or something of that nature, then it is absolutely paramount that we get our thinking and our attitude is kind of a combination of our thoughts and our emotions.
Okay.
And so getting those lined up with where we want to go, at least getting them in the ballpark, is pretty important to get out of the gate. Mental expectancy is the picture that we're drawing in our mind. Like what do we expect? So what is we can get a pretty clear picture of people's mental expectancy by how they talk about. A lot of people that I meet with, they talk about, well, I know I need to go to the gym, but, and then there's something that fills in the blank. Or I know I need to lose weight, but I've done everything that I know how to do. And so they immediately hit roadblocks that stop them in their tracks, and they don't take any further action. Or they remember actions that they have taken in the past that maybe worked for a period of time, but then something changed. And so they use that as a reason not to, why they're not able to achieve it.
And you mentioned a while ago something I think is pretty important as a society. People look around and they see themselves, similar to other people. So they think, well, everybody else is overweight and everybody else has these issues, so I guess I'm normal. So that kind of programs how they think. But we were talking earlier, and you mentioned something about organic computer. What's that, and how does that influence people?
Right. I talk about the organic computer because it's a healthy metaphor for us to look at what drives us. And so the organic computer really is just our brain. We could look at it in a lot of different ways, but for today's conversation, it's our brain. That's the computer. Our programming begins, and so our organic computer is our brain, and our programming, our thoughts, beliefs, what drives our behavior, we would call that the programming.
Right.
And so when we think about thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, those are learned or decided upon as we move through life. Our programming really begins at the time of inception with our genetic programming. I'm not speaking to that so much today as the part we have more control over. The learned part. What are we deciding from moment to moment? So this organic computer idea is really at the crux of everything. What are we telling ourselves about what's going on? What is our story? What is our story? The things that I hear a lot when it comes to physical exercise, when it comes to physical maintenance, when it comes to taking care of the body or other areas of life, are beliefs that are not congruent with achieving a desired outcome.
Right. Like they see themselves as, oh, I'm not the type of person that would exercise, or I'm not the type of person that's in shape. My family is overweight, and that's my story. I'm supposed to be the same way, so this is just who I am.
Right. That's exactly right.
Their story.
And what you were talking about earlier with we live in a culture and a society, and we are taught through media, through advertising in particular, that to take the shortcut. We're taught that if you want to feel good, take the pill, take the drink, wear these clothes, and then that becomes reinforced by societal patterns and behaviors. And like you say, when we tend to surround ourselves with people who are more like-minded to the goal we want to achieve, then we're more likely to model those behaviors. Well, they're modeling the behavior. We're more likely to perform those behaviors or modify our behaviors in a way that kind of aligns with that desired outcome.
Okay. If somebody has decided to do something, they're trying to make a change,
right?
A physical weight loss or whatever, and they're met with some type of mental or emotional kind of roadblocks. What are some steps that people can take to overcome these roadblocks?
Right. So one of the things that we really want to do is, one helpful way to talk about this is looking at stages of change. I use this pretty much with most behavioral modification. Use it a lot with substance use and addictions, and food is certainly an addiction. Sugar's an addiction. Drinks are an addiction. And of course, alcoholic beverages are an addiction, but just sugary drinks, we become habituated to patterns. So from this, it's helpful to look at what the stages of change are. And the first stage of change is pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation, it's just not on the radar at all. I have no awareness. A lot of kids, it's easy to say they can fall into this category. What do they care if they get cavities 15 years from now? It's not on the radar. What do they care if they're overweight 15 years from now?
They're not aware of what something is eating is doing to them.
That's right. And they don't care. The information could be around them, but it's not an issue for them.
Right. So if they're hungry and they decide to go through a drive-through to get a burger and fries, they satisfied the hunger, but beyond what it's actually doing, they're not thinking about it.
That's right.
That's what you're talking
about.
That's
exactly right.
Okay.
The next stage is contemplation.
Okay.
That's an awareness. For somebody that's a smoker, it might be waking up with chest pains. It might be other people giving them feedback. Smoking's an easy target. With weight, it might be you went to the doctor and the doctor said, you're pre-diabetic. Pay attention to this. Oh, really? I'm pre-diabetic. I've always gotten good results back. A lot of times I'll hear people say, well, my doctor tells me I'm fine.
Right.
When they run the blood test, but you can tell that they're not necessarily right. And so but they'll use that as an excuse. But contemplation, there's a seed of awareness for the possibility of change. The challenge with the contemplation phase is there's the awareness, and then do we lean more towards moving in that direction, or do we lean more towards the fear, the doubt, and the uncertainty?
Right.
But once we have the awareness, then the task is on us, right? It's
Right.
really our responsibility once we have the awareness. And so once we have the awareness, we transition into a planning stage, a
Right.
preparation and planning stage. And I should say these don't always go linearly. I think
Mhm.
that's important to
Okay.
mention, but we're going to speak of them in linear terms. And the planning and the preparation phase for somebody with physical fitness goals, they've had the awareness that, hey, I need to make a change. Now we're thinking about really what are some good options. What are some really good options that we have? And so the old programming is going to kick in and say, well, you've tried this, you've tried this, you've tried this. This is a wonderful opportunity to fall right back into old patterns and not progress beyond because of old fears, doubts, and uncertainties. But it's also a wonderful place to really start looking at, what do I really want? And if we can get aligned with that, and we can, people do it all the time. We
Mhm.
see YouTube videos, people achieving this all the time. We know people in our neighborhood who were, 50, 100 pounds overweight. They lost it successfully, and they've maintained it for years. So we know it can happen.
Mhm.
And so once we can start identifying the possibility that it can happen for us, and we start believing in that a little bit, then we start a plan. And the plan does not have to be perfect.
Mhm.
The plan just has to get us moving in that direction.
Mhm.
But the plan alone doesn't move us. So the next stage is action. And action is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Right.
Action is where we're really doing something to affect change.
Mhm.
And again, it may not be the quote unquote right thing, but it is something moving in that direction. Again, this is an area where persistence is very important. Napoleon Hill, in his book Think and Grow Rich, talks about the importance of our thinking.
Mhm.
So when we visit this concept of our organic computer, he says thoughts are things, and powerful things at that, when they're met with a definiteness of purpose,
Mhm.
knowing what we want.
Deciding what to concentrate on.
That's right. And getting clarity about that is important. Knowing what we want.
Mhm.
Persistence. And this is where a lot of us meet with failure. We say we tried it.
Mhm.
I went to the gym,
Mhm.
or at least I signed up for it, and I went 2 or 3 times.
Right.
It doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work because we didn't really work it.
In their mind, they check the box of I did that, but they might not have really have done it correctly.
That's right.
And you mentioned something that I think is really important, that it's in the awareness phase when someone they look for signs that it's possible for them. And that's what's so powerful with weight loss before and after pictures, or that's what's powerful when you get in Weight Watchers or another community of people. That's what's real powerful, I think, in our boot camp, because you come in and you see these other people that, well, it's possible for them. I see their picture on the wall.
Right.
They lost some weight. Maybe it's possible for me. So that's what's really
Absolutely.
powerful about being in that community. It keeps the fire burning,
That's right.
right?
And what you're talking about there too is once we get some, you're talking about developing of a support system,
Right.
having supports. You're talking also about, if I'm hearing you correctly, about modeling. For those of us in this world who are not practiced in a certain behavior, the old habits is the old program.
Mm-hmm.
And that is dominant until we replace it.
Right.
And so one of the things we do is model other people who have been
Mm-hmm.
successful in an area similar to what we're attaining or wanting to attain.
Right.
And so something like you're describing, where you're around other people, maybe they haven't even attained in terms of the long-term goal, but they've attained the short-term milestones of just showing up,
Mm-hmm.
being present, being in the process of moving towards that wellness.
Right. And what he mentioned about replacing, you can't just take something out. This has to do with habits and food. You can't just remove it without replacing it with something.
Right.
Because if there's a vacuum there, there's there can't be a vacuum if it comes to you got to replace a habit, you got to replace foods. If you are taking out a bad habit, you got to replace it with something
That's
new.
right.
If you're taking out a bad food, you got to replace it with something that's healthy, and healthy food can be delicious.
That's right. And just a couple more pieces on that, because we're with the stages of change, but also when we're replacing thoughts, we don't just we want to interrupt the pattern, the old pattern that keeps us on the couch if that's where we are.
Right.
That keeps us in the old behaviors. We want to interrupt that pattern with new behaviors and new ways of thinking, but we also want to replace it. We've got to have new thoughts in its place that fill that void. So we've got pre-contemplation, we've got contemplation where we're thinking about it, we've got planning and preparation, we've got action where the rubber meets the road, and then we've got maintenance, and that's where we're now have a new pattern. And then the last,
become a habit.
It's become a habit.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Okay.
become a habit. We're practicing it routinely. And even this one, though, let's say we have to have knee surgery or something unfortunate like that. And so that pattern gets interrupted,
Mm-hmm.
and the old patterns can creep in. And if they succeed, then we have a lapse or a relapse. And so when we talk about the stages of change, we have to talk about the relapse portion, because just because we miss doing whatever it is we were doing to maintain physical wellness prior, whether it's a Fit Body Boot Camp and being involved every week and just plugging in, or whatever our methods are, if we begin to dip out of that, we're in relapse. And a lot of people will say, oh, well,
Because no matter how much you replace new habits and you've been doing it, those old ones are still latent in the background, aren't they?
They are.
They don't disappear completely.
They are.
Right. And that's similar to why an alcoholic, they consider themselves, always an alcoholic, because even though they've
Some
been clean
do,
for
yeah.
years,
That's right.
there's still that tendency to go back into that
That's right.
old pattern. We've talked before about the power of imagination, how that can influence fitness goals.
Yeah, this is really, I spend a lot of time with imagination when I work with clients, especially if they're at a place where their desired outcome is off in the distance. But even if it's close, or even if it's upon them, we're always looking to progress and change and to grow. And so the faculty of the imagination is very powerful. I'm not going to get this quote right, but Einstein said something to the effect that imagination is more powerful than thoughts. And so, than thinking about something. Our imagination is very powerful, and it doesn't shut off, right? We're constantly using it. The question is, how are we using it?
Right.
Are we using it on purpose and intentionally, or are we a ship at sea just letting things happen to us? So I practice something called mental rehearsal with clients. Now, we're always doing this already. We're always mentally rehearsing things. And so if I'm in traffic and I have a tendency for road rage, then I might be mentally rehearsing how horrible other drivers are and things of that nature, and how everybody else should get off the road but me. I'm practicing a set of thoughts and beliefs. So with mental rehearsal, what I coach folks to do is to practice going to the playground of the mind, and just for 10 to 15 minutes a day. And I can't describe to you the power of this exercise. I have seen lives changed from this 10 to 15 minutes a day.
Wow.
And so going to the playground of the mind and seeing the desired outcome. Now, not everybody is easily able to do that at the outset, because the old programming is so big. I'm not good enough. How can I imagine being good enough? People don't accept me. How can I imagine being accepted? But through some coaching and things of that nature, it is such a powerful exercise. So, beginning with the end in mind, like Stephen Covey asked us to do in his 7 Habits, but it's not just a thinking exercise. It's an emotional exercise. If we can connect with the emotional outcome that we imagine that we're going to have when we've achieved the desired outcome, then we're almost there.
So imagining what you want to become, and then imagining how you would feel and what it would be like to have that outcome.
That's right.
Then that starts making it more real in your mind.
That's
where you
right.
can feel what it would be like.
And just to add this, we now know that the brain is constantly remapping. So this is not just fairy tale stuff. It's not just pie in the sky wishing something to be, although it may start out as that. We're literally reprogramming the brain.
And it's either cementing the bad thoughts that
That's
we
right.
already have,
That's right.
or we can start laying new groundwork for the new thoughts. And then the more you dwell on those thoughts, the more that can become a normal way of thinking and a new highway of thought.
Exactly.
Now, Now, when we talk about cognitive behavior, that makes it sound like we're going a little over my head. So, but you mentioned using cognitive behavior and other techniques to help people achieve goals. What are some tips for getting physically fit using cognitive behavior?
Right. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a technique that's highly evidence-based. Many therapists use it. Many coaches use it. The truth is, we're using it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When people talk about using positive affirmations, they may be using it. And if they can connect at an emotional level through use of a positive affirmation, then it moves from a nice idea to having some energy that's going to propel thoughts and ideas, inspired ideas. When we connect with what we want, and we connect with it at a thinking level, cognitive level, and an emotional level, perhaps at a spiritual level, then the brain immediately begins to formulate solutions to that outcome. They may not all be great ideas, but it's forming them. So when we think about cognitive therapeutic techniques, cognitive behavioral therapeutic techniques, we're really, for the purpose of this, looking at what are those beliefs that keep showing up. So I encourage people to write them down. When you think about going to the gym, or when you think about going to a Fit Body Boot Camp and really maximizing your potential there, what are the thoughts that show up? And a lot of times people aren't aware of the thoughts, but you can physically see their responses, right? And if it's something like that,
do that again. Do that.
then you know that there's this internal dialogue. So cognitive behavioral approaches really look at what's the internal dialogue, because a lot of it's garbage. It's not true. We use all or nothing thinking. Well, I've done everything I know how to do. And if you were to attempt to give somebody like that ideas, they would say, well, I've done that.
Right.
Yeah, but I've already done that.
Right.
And so we just have to counteract that ourselves. We have to find a way to, sometimes I say combat, but really replace those thoughts. And a lot of times there's multiple truths. It may be very true that a person is very overweight and they have a history of not practicing fitness goals, but it is also true that they have the capacity to do that. And so leaning in that direction.
How does, if somebody has had, we see this a lot in what we do, if somebody has a long run of failures trying to reach fitness goals, how can they successfully get around that if they've had a long series of failures?
Yeah. And you know, we've got to look at our programming. What are we saying to ourselves? We have got to find, well, you know, we have to identify what we want, right? We have to know what we want, and we have to be willing. You know, Tony Robbins talks about we've got to make it a must, not a should, but a must.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to do that for us. Nobody has the power to do that for us. And the truth is, we shouldn't be healthy. But if we believe that it's important to us, if we make it important, important, a priority, well, then all of a sudden, you know, we're in a new direction. Anytime somebody comes to look at me for change, whether it's smoke cessation, weight loss, any type of behavioral change, at some point we have the conversation, and it's usually pretty early on, that you've got to make a decision to get off the fence. You have to be willing to get off the fence of this thing. And that's making a decision. So often the struggle is in the indecision. Once the decision's made, now we can figure out what do we need to do to get there.
And a lot of times what I find is that people think the change that they have to make is going to be unpleasant. They think that I'm going to be uncomfortable exercising. That's going to be tough.
That's right.
And they don't realize that it makes you feel better afterwards. Or when it comes to food, they think that I'm happy eating the food I eat now. If I eat healthy food is bland and it's not going to taste good, and I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to miss out on good food. So if they realize that there can be some positive aspects to it, they won't throw up such a wall.
And what you're talking about there, Wayne, just real briefly, if you don't mind, is this pleasure-pain principle. We move towards pleasure and away from pain. And if we see taking care of ourselves as painful, we're not going to do it very long.
We're staying in your comfort zone.
That's right. We have to switch that internal dialogue to see the value in it.
That's amazing. You've really covered a lot today, and I wish we could talk more, but I want to leave people wanting more. I mean, there's so much we could talk about. We could go on and on. But if somebody wanted to find out more about you, or to talk with you about how you could help them personally, because if we haven't given people enough motivation to make change for themselves and they want to explore it more, how can they contact you?
Absolutely. You can reach me at www.jamesabarbour.com, and that's James ABARBOUR.com. And my direct number is 252-414-0534. And I do offer free 15-minute phone consultations, and happy to meet and greet with anybody that's just kind of exploring options.
That's great. So before we leave, can you summarize real quick? We talked about a lot of things. Can you summarize things that we can do to overcome self-limiting mental and emotional limitations?
Sure. And I'm just going to use a cheat sheet here to keep it very, very clear and concise. Intentional thinking is paramount.
Deciding what you're thinking about.
That's right. We got to know what we want. We got to be clear about it.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping the big goal in mind, but also keeping milestones in mind.
Right.
Because sometimes, it's how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So we want to have those milestones there. We haven't talked about this, but we've got to know why we want what we want.
Why?
And we hear people say, when the why is big enough, I've heard Jack Canfield talk about this,
right.
When the why is big enough, the how's going to follow.
Right.
But we try to get to the how before we're ready. The how will come, and it may not be perfect. But when we know what we want and we get clear about it, remember, Napoleon Hill, knowing what we want is paramount, persistence, and then following that up with a burning desire. We got to have that. Grow the desire, make it a must, not a should. Interrupt the old program. So, and then we've got to replace that old program. We've got to find a way to meet the emotional need. If we don't find a way to find the value in it at an emotional level, we're not going to stick with it. Practice mental rehearsal, and it really is fun. I call it the playground of the mind. Take immediate action.
Mm-hmm.
When we have inspired thoughts towards something that we have as a goal or a dream, we're going to have those inspired thoughts, and it's our responsibility to take immediate action on those things. Take persistent action. So keep taking the action until we get the results we want. Mm-hmm. And we know some of the most successful people on the planet, however you define that, in whatever category you define it, it's met with failure after failure after failure, and then breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then model those who are successful. And this is one of the things I like about you, Wayne. I've known you for well over a year now, and you are a model. I've seen you at work at Fit Body Boot Camp. I've seen you interact with other people. I've heard you speak to food and nutrition, which is, of course, a very important part of it. And, you're living the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody really wants to learn how to improve their physical fitness, you model that behavior.
Right. Well, for years, and we're gonna end on this. We're
Yeah.
almost done. But for years, when people have come to me as a personal trainer or at the boot camp, I've realized that I've been approaching it wrong. I've been giving them the tools. I've been giving them the how.
Okay.
This is how you should eat. This is how you should work out, instead of getting them to address the why.
Okay.
And how they're thinking.
Right.
And that's why I wanted to explore this, because it's something I've really gotten heavy in the last year, and that we have to get people to focus on the why first.
That's exactly right.
And the actions you take come from how you think. And that's that.
There you
I
go.
think that's the summary of this.
There you go.
So you covered a lot, but you can change it one little thought at a time, and you don't have to eat the whole elephant at one time. But practice some of the things he talked about, and you'll be on your way to taking new actions and thinking new thoughts. And then when these new actions, you see a small change, that's going to increase the belief for you to take another step, and it's going to increase it and increase it and increase the belief, and it'll be easier and easier to have these new thoughts and take new actions. Thanks again, James.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Appreciate
Wayne.
it.
I appreciate it.
All right, don't forget his contact information again.
252-414-0534 and jamesabarbour.com, and that's BARBOUR.
Super. It will be in the links to the video.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Wayne.